Hello and welcome. Summer is officially here and July 1st is Canada Day. And we always try and do ribs on the barbecue and I try and make a pot of baked beans. This is the recipe that I use and I am doing 2 pounds of beans. I use navy beans, just a great value brand, and I use the dark brown sugar, an onion. I also use the molasses and then I use a whole package of bacon. It's not even a pound of bacon anymore. It's 375 grams, but I always use a whole package of bacon. And this is what I use to make my baked beans. I put the beans in a bowl and then I pour boiling water over them and I set the timer for 15 minutes and I just let them sit and I let the beans absorb as much water as they can in that time. And while that is happening, I have my good old roast pan out. I've tried using my cast iron pan to make them, but they always turn out a lot better in my good old fashioned roast pan. And I also have my oven preheating to 350 degrees. So I just dice up the onion and then I take the package of bacon out and I just take a few slices out at a time and then I just cut them up and then put them all into the pan with the onions. While I'm cutting the bacon, I'll give you a little backstory on baked beans and how I started making them. Growing up as a child, my mom would usually make them once or twice a year, and she would make a lighter bean without molasses, and she also boiled hers first, and I found sometimes they would get a little bit mushy because they were really soft from boiling them. And then I met my husband, and he preferred the darker bean made with molasses. And then one year for Christmas, my mom gave me this church cookbook, and I was looking through it one day and I found the recipe for baked beans. And I'm like, okay, this was the beans. We had some friends that we would go to their family functions and all of that, and they would make the dark beans. And this church cookbook was kind of from that area. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give a try making them. And I started to make them. It took me a while to figure it out. And when I started making them, I'd put one onion in the middle and then I would let it just cook. And then I'd put a few slices of bacon on top and then I would use the lard. But then as I started making it more and more, I started to dice up the onion. And you don't even know that the onions are in the beans because it just kind of like caramelizes with all the molasses and brown sugar. And then one day I went to make them. I didn't have lard. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to use a whole package of bacon. And that's what I've been doing ever since. So for 2 pounds of beans, I use about 1¼ cups of brown sugar. And the other thing that I'm going to do this time is write everything down as I do it, because I did make beans last week and I always get a lot of questions because people always say, how do you get your beans so saucy? Every time I make mine, they dry out. And it's one of those things that it's really hard to give the recipe because you really have to figure it out on your own. And that's exactly what I had to do. So I thought I'd share a little bit of the process with all of you so you're not too intimidated. And I thought I'd share with you some of the things that I have learned over the years making these beans and that I'm writing them down too because I get a lot of questions whenever I make them for potlucks, kind of how you do it. So you saw the recipe in the cookbook, but it really doesn't kind of give all of the little details that I've kind of perfected over the years. Now I'm using molasses. I usually use about 3/4 cup, and I was right at the end of this container because I did make beans last week for a potluck. So what I'm going to do is scrape out as much as I can, and then I'm going to put some water in the container and shake it up a little bit because I do have to add water to the beans. So I'm just going to try and get all of the molasses out as I can. I am doing all of this while the timer is running, and even if it takes you a little bit longer than the 15 minutes, it's okay. I don't know where the 15 minutes came from in the original recipe, but I've pretty much stuck to it because it gives me that time to get everything kind of ready for the beans. So I'm just mixing all of this up, and I just want to make sure that the sugar is broken up and there's no big hard clumps in it. And then I strain the beans. I have put all of this in the pan, but I find when I strain them, it just works better. It absorbs some of the water and plumped up a little bit, but they're still nice and firm. And then I'm just going to run hot water and then I'm going to fill my kettle up. So when I put the beans into my roasting pan and get everything mixed up, I'm just going to cover it with the hot water. The hardest part of making the beans is done. You have to cut up the onion and the bacon. All of the other stuff is just measuring it and then putting it in the roast pan. Now I've added the beans and I'm going to cover it with the hot water, and then I'm just going to give it a stir. I want to make sure that the molasses and the brown sugar kind of gets incorporated with all the water. And honestly, the oven is going to do the rest of the work. It's going to plump up, they're going to cook, they're going to get brown, and you just have to be patient. So I put the lid on, and then I'm going to put them into the oven, and then I'm just going to write down all of the steps again that I do. And over the years of making the beans, I actually discovered a little trick that just kind of happened, because I had to make beans and they had to be made, but I wasn't going to be home all day. So I was kind of like turning the oven on and off as I was in and out of the house. And they were some of the best beans that I ever made. So according to the recipe, you put them in the oven and then you check them after an hour. Honestly, after that first hour, nothing really happens. You can see that the onions have kind of come to the top. You can see a little bit of brown starting, but you can see the beans in here. They're still pretty white and they really haven't plumped up at all. So I'm just going to give it a stir just to kind of share with you. So I'm going to put them back in the oven for another hour and then check them. So usually after 2 hours is when I check them. And whenever I take the lid off, you're going to see a big difference now. So you can see that they have definitely absorbed some of the liquid, and as I stir it, you can see the water is down at the bottom. The beans are starting to take on that brown color and the bacon is cooked. But the fat and the flavor from the bacon, the saltiness is going to cook in with the beans. So what I'm going to do is just even it all out, and then I'm going to cover it with water, and then I'm going to put them back in the oven, and I'm going to turn everything off for about 2 hours, and then I'm going to put it back on for an hour and then check it. That's the way I do it. Sometimes it's different, depending on what I have going on for the day, but really, everything is starting to happen right now. So I'm going to turn the oven off, let the beans sit, and then this is after sitting for 2 hours and then baking them for another hour. So you can see that they're pretty nice and brown. There's still some liquid, but I know that they're going to keep absorbing them, and I don't want to add too much liquid because I don't want them to be too watery, but I also don't want them to dry out. So as I stirred them around, I can see kind of the liquid coming to it. So I'm going to put them back in the oven for an hour and then turn off the oven and then kind of let them sit. And that's what I do. You have to have patience. So this is what they're looking like at the end of the baking and everything. So they're definitely getting nice and brown. They're still liquid at the bottom. They're still going to keep absorbing it, and the flavor is getting into the beans. I just find like you really need to be patient, and if you're going to make them the day before. So I am going to give them a little taste test, and the beans are tasting good. They're cooked, but they're not crunchy and they're not really soft. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stir it around again, and then I'm going to let them sit in the oven until it cools down, and then I'm going to put them in the fridge overnight. It is the next day. I just took the beans out of the oven. I'm preheating it to 350 degrees. I'm going to bake them for another hour, and we are going to start the ribs. We've tried a lot of recipes over the years, but we found this sweet and smoky ribs recipe from the Pioneer Woman, and we stopped looking because this one is perfect. You make the spice rub, and I find the 2 teaspoons of smoked paprikas a little bit strong flavor. I do 1 teaspoon of smoked and 1 teaspoon of regular paprika. The supervisors got distracted. Hubby was taking the membranes off the ribs. Then he put the rub in, and then we're going to wrap them up in the tin foil and let them sit on the cookie sheets here, and they're going to go into a 300-degree oven. But I wanted to put the beans back in for another hour just to heat them all the way through, give them one last little bake. So we're doing corn on the cob in the air fryer, and then I have a box of mac and cheese I'm using. So this is what the beans look like after sitting in the fridge. There's still a little bit of liquid at the bottom, but that's okay. They're still nice and brown. They have absorbed a little bit more. And this is what the ribs look like after they were done in the oven. So I just put them in a bowl. Hubby is going to barbecue them with some sauce just to get that nice sauciness on them. But they're still going to fall off the bone. So I made a nice rib sandwich for our son. He loved it. And this is the finished ribs. They just look perfect. And then a little bit of sauce. And then this is what the beans are looking like. You can see a little bit more liquid. I think it was almost a little bit too much liquid this time, but they're nice and brown. The flavor is there. They just look amazing. And I still think they're a little bit almost too saucy this time. I do have a new oven and I find it's really different compared to my last one, so I just wanted to share with you. It does take time to figure it out, and yes, I think I might have added just a little bit too much water this time, but I think I gave you a good idea of the whole process of making beans. So if you're going to give it a try, good luck and let me know how they turn out. But here's the finished plate. The ribs were so good. The beans were really good. I do the corn in the air fryer. It's so simple. And my goal for next year is to find the perfect recipe for stovetop mac and cheese. So I hope you enjoyed watching a little bit of my barbecue prep, and I look forward to sharing more recipes with all of you.